The Finance Committee meeting being held on Monday, February 22nd, 2021. This is a virtual meeting. And present, the roll call present would be Representative Casper, Representative Katowski, Representative Chase, Representative Powers, Representative Foster, and also in attendance is the town manager, John Burke, the town clerk, Betsy McAllister, the RTM moderator, Eben, and there he is, John Rayner, and Representative Ali Stockley. Okay. The first item on the agenda, we have no unfinished business. So the next item is Colonel Ledyard School property proposed sale. And let me see. Okay, and the resolution says to enter into an option to purchase agreement to recommend the sale of the former Colonel Ledyard School property to the RTM and to authorize the town manager to sign all required documentation to finalize the sale of the former Colonel Ledyard School. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. All right. Does the town manager or John Reiner, do you want to help us along with this proposal?
Sure. John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development Services. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So very quickly, tonight, the purpose of the RTM's review on this really is looking at the disposition of public property, the process that we take this through, the public hearing, and the approval that the RTM then has the review for has to do more with, does the town want to sell the property? Question mark. Yes, do we have additional information right now about what the property is going to be used for? But the real question before the RTM is whether or not to sell the property as the town and to dispose of it. To give a little bit of background, the project for Colonel Ledyard is looked at right now in two phases. The first phase is going to be somewhere between 12 and 20 one-bedroom apartments as currently envisioned by the developer. This would be a project that they would take through the City of Groton planning and zoning process in reutilizing the existing Colonel Ledyard School. And if that goes through successfully, they would then look to do a second phase on the project in the back portion of the property in the area that is currently cleared, not to take down a lot of the trees. There's been some questions on there, or to infringe at all on the wetlands on the property. That would all be preserved as part of the development, and to do, I think, a couple of apartment buildings in the back, totaling maybe about another 60 units. But again, that hasn't been fully vetted out. Happy to answer any questions process-wise and where we are with this.
So John, you had a public hearing. Were there any concerns at the public hearing?
We did hear from one abutter in the area at the public hearing, and then also the mayor for the city of Groton also spoke in favor of the project at that public hearing also.
How much are we selling the property for, did you say?
I did not say, and I'm just pulling up the option agreement. I believe that it is about $42,000, but give me 1 second and I'll get right back to you on that. One of the things that's difficult with a number of these properties is they all do have a fair bit of environmental remediation. It's $41,000, sorry, not 42. A fair bit of environmental remediation that is required of each of these: lead paint, asbestos, and other things within the building. So there is a bit of liability that's taken on with all of these.
Any questions? Sean?
Oh, I can't hear him.
Yeah, now you can.
Okay.
Doesn't want to unmute me from my picture, sorry. John, quick question for you. You answered the first part, well, as far as the remediation of the school and the age of the school and what our liabilities are with that. Can you explain just a little bit more on the plan of conservation and development as far as the city is concerned for that property and what it will do for the growth and development according to that plan, please? Thank you.
Sure. So very quickly, right now, today, this property does not pay any property taxes to the town or to the city. It'll be put on the grand list. Specifically, what this property is within the city's plan of conservation development, I don't recall off the top of my head, but that is something that we did talk to the previous town planner from the city. Actually, the previous two town planners in the city. There's been both Barbara when she was there and then Dennis Godair about the development and redevelopment of the property. They were both looking forward to seeing something happening at this site.
Thank you.
Representative Chase?
Thank you. John, why do these properties sell for such a small amount of money?
So very good question. That a lot of that gets into that environmental remediation that has to happen out there. And when we're looking at the sale on a number of these properties, the value of them when we do appraisals, doing appraisals on properties like this, there's a lot more art to it than there is science. And a lot of it's a guess based on other properties. And the appraisers aren't going through and doing a full, phase 1 or phase 2 environmental remediation. But when we look at the sale, we're looking at two things. It's, yes, there's some funding that we're interested in getting in through the sale transaction, but for the long term, that's actually a very small value, because what we're the most interested in is that once this is built, every year, the amount of tax revenue that we're going to be getting from this property versus today, we're not getting any tax revenue. So that's really the main focus with a lot of these redevelopments.
Right. And do you know, with a ballpark idea of what the tax revenue will be with phase 1 and then with phase 2?
I think we have those numbers somewhere. Let me look those up while
I believe
other people-
phase 1 was a 100,000, but I don't think we've looked at phase 2 yet because that's still kind of nebulous.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
just to make clear to everyone, that will be a completely separate process to the city when they get to the phase 2 for approval. So people will get chances to weigh in on that when and if that comes along.
So their public hearing just was talking about phase 1.
Well, the public hearing is really about selling property generally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the public hearing isn't even necessarily about what the use is going to be. It's really, do you want to sell the property as a town? Yes or no? That really, when we boil it down, do we have more information available right now? Yes, we certainly do. But there are going to be other instances where sometimes we take something through with public hearing and we don't have a signed agreement yet. Or I mean, in this instance, we still don't have a signed agreement. We're going to do that after all the authorizations, but we don't even have a draft agreement. We have concepts of some of these properties. For example, with Groton Heights, we have a letter of understanding or a letter of intent. We had the public hearing on that one. That one hasn't come before the RTM yet, but just for, process wise.
So with that 100,000 guesstimate, how much of that goes to the town and how much goes to the city? Is there a set percentage rate?
I think that's just based on our mill rate. It would generate something else for the city. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, so the city mill rate, we actually don't calculate for some of these. And, I would just want to double check. I can't remember for the first phase, if it was 50 or if it was 100. Let me see if I can find some data on that.
So in other words, they would be just like any other city resident. They would pay the town and the city tax.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
John, did you have any other buyers other than this one company or developer?
So when we go through these processes, we often look at which developer is the most financially capable of doing this. And this one particular developer has done other projects like this, has a proven track record, and that's what we're looking for. So again, we often, with some of these properties over time, we've had people say, oh, okay, well, I'll buy that right now. Well, all right, and then you're going to do what with it? And some of them will sit on it. This developer, and within this option agreement, we have provisions in place. They have to begin the development process and get it built and constructed, and they can't just land bank it, which, okay, yes, somebody else owns it and they're paying a little bit of property taxes, but we're looking at having it become something so that it serves a need of housing around EB in that area, as well as paying a good amount of property taxes for Groton.
Do you have another public hearing when phase 2 comes along?
So through the city planning and zoning process, that's where all of the future public hearings will end up being. I believe that to develop this property, they need a special permit through the city. And at that point in time, there would be a public hearing through the city's planning and zoning process. But what is before the town, the question before the town is selling the property in its entirety.
And how long has the school been empty?
Longer than I've worked for the town. I've been here 6.5 years. The city was leasing it from the town for a number of years. I believe the city put a new roof on the building and then thought they were going to use it for something. Decided not to, and gave it back to the town. I can't remember the exact year. I can look through the RFP, which I do have available. I think that might have something about when the school was first vacant.
Was it like 2006?
It could be, but I don't know that off the top of my head, so I don't want to totally commit to that. If you give me 1 minute, I'll find that. I don't know if somebody has another question.
Any other questions?
It was closed in 2008.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
I have one more question for John.
Well,
They're not asking for any tax increment financing, John, are they, on that property?
No,
And as far as remediation is concerned, we'd have to pay for remediation to get the higher value for the property. Is that correct? So that we had a clean site in order to sell it?
correct.
And that would cost what? We have no idea, because we have no idea what the cleanup costs are going to be. Correct?
Correct. And one of the difficult things with none of these properties is a one size fits all, because in this instance, some people could say, oh, well, let's pay to knock down the school. Well, in this particular instance, we have a developer that's interested in reutilizing the school building that's there. There's going to have to be a lot of work done internally to do that, but he found it beneficial to reutilize that existing space, doing remediation and others. Some of our other properties, for example, the Sealy School, they're actually going to demolish the school because of looking at that property. It made sense to take that school out and rebuild on the site. So each one, again, with all of these, there is no one size fits all.
Yeah, I see they're doing the Sealy School, because I've been by it. They started work on it. And I do want to thank you for all your efforts here as far as this property is concerned. The more we can alleviate our liabilities on these empty buildings and properties, the stronger we are for our bond rating in our town. Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
Bev,
yes, Roseanne?
I have my hand up.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. I have some questions about in the RFP. I didn't really get a chance to read it in detail, but I did browse it a little bit. And on page 12, under project incentives, there's a list, and among that list is tax abatement programming. I was wondering what that is and if it includes bonds.
Right now, there are no bonds that are proposed for this. So this was in the RFP talking about some of the things that we do have available. So we're not planning on doing any bonding for this property.
What about tax abatement?
If there's any tax abatement that happens for this property, and it would be at the phase from once they purchase the property during the time when they're doing the construction prior to the certificate of occupancy for up to 1 year.
And just so you know, I mean, this is off topic, but your investment opportunity and market analysis is 6 years old. So Electric Boat is not hiring the way you have it presented here, just as a sidebar. And the
Actually, if I can comment on that, we were just
Sure.
hearing from EB at a presentation a couple of weeks ago of how over the course of the next year, they're looking to be hiring another couple thousand over the next couple of years, literally thousands more people.
Well, right, but not 10,
Well, is this RFP, I think, was issued,
right?
what, back in 2018, 19? Let me think here for a second. 19. So during that time period, EB is hiring
Hired.
a substantial, has hired and continues to hire a significant amount of people. Some of that is new employees. And again, we've been saying all along, the largest number of people that they're hiring are to replace all of their retiring workforce and just the natural turnover of the workforce. That's a significant number.
Okay, also in the option to purchase, I'm assuming where it's conditions, there's something about infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, stormwater. Now, if that has to be done, you're saying none of that would be bonded?
First, what page are you reading from?
4,
Page 4 of the option agreement?
yeah. It's in the conditions. I'm just trying to see if there's, a tax liability here, and if the tax, is this a public partnership? And if it is, are we going to be married to this developer for 30 years?
There is no proposed tax increment financing. There are no proposed bonds. And this here, so the conditions precedent, as I'm looking at this document in front of me right
At
now.
the very bottom.
Okay, any improvements that, they're saying in the developer's conceptual plan that the developer should include any infrastructure improvements that they plan on making.
Got it. And one more question. There's a lot of deadlines here on page 5. There's a 30-day deadline, then there's a 60-day possible extension. Is there, since it seems like the town and the developer are kind of in it together, is there anybody that's outside that goes through and monitors to make sure the developer meets the deadlines?
Yes. So this is a contract. This is an actual contract between the town and the developer. And these deadlines are put in here for both protection of the town as well as for the developer. So these particular deadlines are talking about when, prior to the developer moving forward with the planning and zoning process before the city, they have to submit a conceptual plan to the town. And then the town council has to say, yes, that conceptual plan is consistent or not consistent with the conceptual plan we've seen before. And this here is saying the amount of time that they have to submit that to us and how the reasonable timelines that we, the town, then have to get back to them with an answer if that's good or not.
But who makes sure that they do it? Like, who's the overseer? The town?
So the town attorney,
Okay,
we're held, to the standards of the council, to the RTM. I mean, this is a public document, and this is an actual legal contract.
thank you.
Any other questions? Kathy?
Roseanne brought something else up about bonding. So I understand bonding when the town bonds, but when you're talking about a developer and bonding, does that mean the town bonds for a certain project and the town pays it back, or the developer pays it back?
So for this project, there's a number of different types of bonds. So there is something that often a developer will come in, they will do a work on a project, and towards the end of the project, they might say, all right, for example, I still have to do all of my landscaping and it's February. I'm not going to plant the landscaping, but I'd like to get a certificate of occupancy the developer will post a bond, a cash bond or a surety bond or something like that to cover the cost of that landscaping if they don't do it. And that's something we require through our regulations. This would be that, if there was any bonding on the site, it would be that, and it would be handled by the city through their planning and zoning process. So there's no public infrastructure bonds that we're looking at for this development or any of the other developments that we're contemplating right now, to my knowledge.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had my hand up.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm like, my computer shut itself off, so I don't have everything in front of me. My only question just really comes down to the land itself. I think you've put me in a good place in terms of what we should be focusing on in terms of the decision. And I've probably been thinking too much about what it's going to turn into, but it seems like there's a lot of wooded space. Was there any thought in terms of splitting it so that the town could retain some of that and just get rid of the liability in terms of the building?
So by that wooded space remaining in private ownership, they'll actually be paying taxes to that. The developer is certainly open to hiking trails or walking trails back through that property if there's something we can do to connect that for an amenity for the public. So there's a lot of forested land, a lot of wetlands in town, that wetlands, and in the city, they have their own layer of protection on there. So I think it's, in this instance, it's fine that the town is selling the property as a whole and not cutting off a piece.
This is John. I talked to Mayor Hedrick recently about this, and he's pretty interested in having some sort of trail connection, and I'll look at that through their city planning process.
John, wouldn't some of the wooded space have to come down in order to do phase 2? Or is there enough open space behind the Colonel Ledyard School building to develop another apartment complex in phase 2?
So in talking with the developer, they think that there's actually enough cleared land now to do all of phase 2 that they need to. Once they get into the drainage, they haven't engineered the design yet. I don't know the exact outlay of the land area, but their intention is to keep as much of the land forested as they can.
And this
Again,
developer has lots of experience in developing property into apartment buildings.
He's done other conversion projects like this and this kind of small to medium scale development.
Yeah, so I think the main reason I was asking is just, once it's off the town's, once it's no longer ours, and we don't have control over it anymore. And you look at some other places around town, like Noank, that property, and we maintain that as green space. And so that's really just, I didn't know if there was any vision or any discussions in terms of what some of the other space could be used for, but that's the only reason I was asking.
Any other questions? John Burke, did you want to say something before?
That's okay. It was covered.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote on this resolution? Are we ready? Does anybody want to make the motion? I can read it if you want me to.
I don't
Okay.
have it in front of me.
Is it
Okay.
the bottom part of that, like it says resolved that the town
Yeah.
will just put in,
Just put in the RTM Finance Committee recommends that.
I'll read it if you want.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
All right, be it resolved that the RTM Finance Committee hereby authorizes the town manager to sign an option to purchase agreement, hereby recommends the sale and the referral of the 120 West Street, former Colonel Ledyard School property to the and authorizes the town manager to sign all documents required for the closing of the property. I so move.
Second, Foster.
Okay. All those in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Abstentions?
One,
One, Roseanne?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, John. And you're here for the next one too, so.
I'm here for the next one too.
The next item on the agenda is the Gold Star Highway property. And it's excess property redevelopment 517-529 Gold Star Highway, authorization for sale and refer to RTM. John, you want to start us off with that?
Sure. So again, John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development Services. So we had issued this RFP back in 2016. This was actually the first property that we had issued an RFP on for this public disposition process. And we've been working with a couple of developers over that time, but this latest one that we've been dealing with, it really has assembled some of the adjacent land next to it and is proposing to do a multifamily housing
Hey,
development.
John, can you hold on 1 second?
Sure.
We have to read the resolution before we can actually talk about it. I keep forgetting about that. Okay, so a resolution to enter into an option to purchase agreement to recommend the sale of the 517 and 529 Gold Star Highway property to the RTM and to authorize the town manager to sign all required documentation to finalize the sale of the 517 and 529 Gold Star Highway property. All right, go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you. As it currently stands, so the developer that has a potential option on this property also owns some of the abutting property and has optioned some of the other adjoining property. The town property is about 11.75 acres in size. This was a piece of property that we, the town, actually took over in a tax foreclosure for someone not paying their taxes. The preferred developer is looking to develop approximately 300 multifamily housing units, again, market rate units. And, again, just to reiterate the process here, really looking at the sale of the property. Should the town hold the property or should the town sell the property? That's the real question that is before us. This property is located in the town. So once this moves forward, if the RTM approves this sale, the developer would then continue with their due diligence on the property. And we probably sometime in the next 6 months or so would expect an application before the Planning and Zoning Commission within the town of Groton. At this time, they are not looking for any tax abatements, no tax increment financing, and no infrastructure improvements that would be paid for by the town. I think that covers most of some of the concerns that were brought up with some of the last ones.
And John, you said,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say the option agreements for each of these properties are all very similar. We're using a very similar model. So a lot of those same deadlines that Representative Katowski had brought up about the 30 days to 60 days, because the developer will need to bring that plan back before the council prior to them going before the Planning and Zoning Commission to make sure the plan that they're taking to the commission is in fact consistent with what the council had seen before and right down the line.
And this one's selling for a bit more because we don't have the same liability with buildings on it and contamination. And then we're expecting at full build, if it's built as conceived, it would be approximately 800,000 in tax revenue per year.
Correct. So thanks for bringing that point up, John. So when this is built, depending on which development gets built first, this or Sealy, one of those two will end up being the third highest taxpayer in the town of Groton.
And how much are we selling it for?
The sale price is, hold on, it's around 200 and give me a second here.
Count the deposits, that type of stuff, it's 228,000.
Thank you, John.
And do you know what kind of apartment? Is it going to be apartments when you say multifamily? And if it's gonna be apartments, are they gonna be high-rise apartments or like 3 stories?
I think they're looking at more the mid-rise, 3 to 4 story apartments, consistent with the zoning, not a high-rise type of apartment. I expect a design similar to what we are seeing at the Sealy School, something along those lines.
And when we had the public hearing, there were no comments because there's not residential right near here. Single family residential.
Correct.
Any questions? Sean?
Thank you, Beverly. Now, with these projects going on, do we have a number of housing units that we're putting in now? Are we over 1,200 now? Do we have an idea when they're all built out? And what's the build out on this for a timetable, John? Do you know? They offered any information? Is it a year, 3 years? What's their plan?
So full build out on this, it could take, a couple of years, 2 to 3 years from a time frame. I think, when you start penciling things out, it all depends on when they get their planning and zoning commission application in. So if we said, 6 to 9 months on that, then it might take 3+ months to get their approval. It's located on a state road. They need to get a permit from the state traffic commission. That could take another 3 to 6 months. Then, all right, they would start breaking ground, clearing the site. There's a bit of site work that they need to do. I think, we're probably looking at, a 3-year time frame or so, give or take a year.
Thank you.
Representative
question.
Chase?
John, I can't picture where that property is. Is that across from the car dealership? Because I see land clearing being done there.
So I don't, there was the old, there was a plumber's,
Oh, Chitucket Plumbing.
Tucket
Thank you.
Plumbing, yep.
Oh, that's where it's gonna be.
it's part of that. So that was a piece
Okay.
that was privately owned,
Yeah.
and it'll be going west from there and behind there.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Did Chintucket Plumbing sell that property to the town, or did the town always own that property?
Neither. So the Chitucket Plumbing property is privately held, and that was not sold or given to the town or taken from the town by foreclosure. This was a separate piece of property. This, 11.75 acres. This property is to the west, an entirely different property, but they abut one another, and it'll all be one larger development.
Roseanne?
Yeah, okay, so thank you. You did answer some of my other questions because I had similar questions for this property as well. But in the sale agreement, there's some information about, on page 4 regarding staff. How much staff time do you anticipate being devoted to this project? I mean, and is this like a public-private partnership? Because it looks like you have to help with the approvals and cooperate with moving this project forward. So, I mean, do you just assign one person to this project?
So all of these properties are a public-private partnership in the sense that we, the town, are working with the developer to see a property get developed. Right now, this is a piece of town property. We're selling it to a developer. Once it's owned by the developer, or even once they have the option agreement on it, we would work with them in the same way methodologies we would with any other development coming before the town. And dedicate the same level of staff time as we would, a 300-unit apartment complex is a significant development, and it'll take a significant amount of staff time through the review process, through planning and zoning commission, then through the construction process with our building inspectors, etc.
I have one more question. On page 6, it says the development and part of the objectives. Development which is complementary to the existing and surrounding neighborhood. I was wondering if that's boilerplate for all sale agreements.
that is language that is usually taken out of our zoning regulations and subdivision regulations. I think that is pretty boilerplate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, are we ready to vote on the resolution to?
If I can just add one other thing, and yes, although that language may be quote unquote boilerplate, it is something that we still require, that we want to make sure development is complementary to in this area, to this property that we currently own and are selling, to what's happening around there. Around there is a commercial district, and it's a commercial district that allows commercial and multifamily housing. Adjacent to this property, when you look to the west, there's a number of office buildings there. So we want to make sure that it flows and works with what is along that current corridor. Thank you.
And I'm assuming that this developer has plenty of experience building multifamily complexes.
Yeah, they're actually one of the top developers in the country in doing high quality, great multifamily housing developments.
And as how soon after this all passes do they start working? Does the development start?
So a great question. It all depends on how you define start. So I think really what's going to happen is the day after this is approved by the RTM, I expect their attorney for the developer to be sending us a copy of this agreement signed by them, to then be signed by John Burt. They will then continue with their additional due diligence on the property, more environmental testing, flagging wetlands, any surveying they need to do with the property, digging test pits, etc., and then really designing from an engineering perspective, the site, designing the drainage, all of those things, because that costs a lot of money. So they've done some initial work on that now, but until they have an agreement with us, they're reluctant to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that level of due diligence.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have
So
if to recognize me, it's Representative Whitney. But
go
I'm not.
ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. So it's Representative Whitney, and I have a question about first the stormwater handling on the site. That was the location where years ago the Super Walmart was turned down because of stormwater concerns, because it is in the area, the watershed, direct watershed of the Groton Utilities Reservoir. That's one question. My second question is, has there actually been a public hearing on this yet? Because it looked like it's going to be, I think, in February, but now I see it scheduled for March. And if there's not been a public hearing, why are we voting on it right now? Or why are you voting on it right now? And then the third question is, does the current zoning support the proposed use? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to take those in order. So one, dealing with the, yes, this property is in the Water Resource Protection District. And since that time, so when we updated our zoning regulations over the past few years, one of the standards we put in place is we have much stricter, much more thorough stormwater regulations than we had in the past. In addition, that's something we have stressed with this development from day one. Even in the RFP itself, there was language about utilizing the best available technologies and certain designs for stormwater, because it's our groundwater. We need to make sure we're preserving that resource. So it will be built to a very high level, high standard, just like any other commercial or residential development will be moving forward in the town of Groton because of our very, very strict stormwater standards. So the question on the public hearing, very good question. So we had a public hearing for this property, but we realized that there was a potential error due to we didn't put a sign up on the property for advertising the public hearing. There are exemptions due to Connecticut state laws because of COVID about some of the public hearing requirements, but out of an abundance of caution, we're having a second public hearing now that it's advertised and there's a sign out on the property at the next town council meeting. That public hearing will in fact happen prior to the formal vote of the RTM. And then the third question you had, the zoning. The zoning for this property allows this use by right, meaning it's an allowed use, but they still need to go before the Planning and Zoning Commission and get their approvals, design the property in the proper way.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
I just have-
Representative Whitney, I had the same concern about the public hearing, and the town manager told me at the first public hearing, no one showed up, and that because this property isn't in a neighborhood, he didn't see that there would be any problems with developing the property. So, because I was going to hold off on this until after they had the next public hearing, but with the town manager's reassurance, I went along and I put it on the agenda. Go ahead, Roseanne, I'm sorry.
So zoning right, or what was that phrase you used?
It's an allowed use by right, meaning that they still need to go through the same formal process. They don't need a special permit to put in multifamily housing in the zone. It's a use that's allowed by right,
By
but they
right.
still have to design it to meet all the
Go through the
standards.
site planning process,
Yes,
right?
meet all the conditions of site plan approval.
Go to inland
any-
wetlands, all that stuff. Yeah,
Exactly.
whatever's where, yeah.
Thank you.
Representative Chase?
Thank you. Representative Whitney brought up the Walmart, and so it jogged my memory. So how does this differ from the Walmart that nobody wanted there?
Well, one, it's not a Walmart. I didn't work for the town when the Walmart was proposed, but there were a number of factors dealing with that Walmart and also some of the opposing views on Walmart. And, you know, I think we could digress into a number of different issues that don't have a lot to do with site planning and environmental precautions, as opposed to other large box developments that are sometimes against other large box developments, and some of those things happening. It should also be mentioned that one of the properties that is further south, that was part of that former Walmart development, was donated by the owners to the Avalonia Land Conservancy. So one of the pieces of property, I think that was a more environmentally sensitive piece, is actually going to be permanently protected open space. That donation happened after we began working with this particular developer preferred development team, but that was something that was donated. So there will be a nice buffer to the south of this property that is preserved open space. And John Burt and myself walked that property. It was pre-COVID, so at least 18 months ago, John?
Yeah, yep. And then we did discuss this with Avalonia and some of them, and they were actually eager to have trails leading into this development, you know, to get use out of their open space.
Thank you.
I have one last question. When you have the public hearing, is the public hearing about just selling the property, or do you let the people know what you intend to do with the property when you have the public hearing?
The intent of the public hearing is just about selling the property, but do we talk about selling and what the property is going to be used for? Yes, it's the same as we are here tonight. Because really, you know, when you, again, per the charter, the role of the RTM for this is, do we sell the property or do we not sell the property? does the town keep a piece of property or dispose of it? And it doesn't really, give guidance on the use of the property. Is it nice for us to have this information, knowing the tax implications, what it will do for the town? Yes, that's all helpful information, but that's not the real, guiding question.
I think it does help to have all the information for me personally, before I decide whether to sell the property or not. I like to have more information about what really is going on with the property, but that's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion or a resolution on the floor, on the floor. Well, on Zoom, to recommend to the RTM, am I wording this right, Kathy? To recommend to the RTM to authorize the town manager to sign an option to purchase agreement, hereby recommending the sale and the referral of the 517 and 529 Gold Star Highway properties for approval by the RTM, and authorize the town manager to sign all documents required.
For the closing of the property.
For the closing of the property. Oh,
I
yeah, I
second
see that. You second? Okay. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstentions? Okay. So it's going forward to the RTM. Sean, you second that, right? Okay. All right. We have nothing else on our agenda for tonight.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Chase and Kathy. Okay, it is 7:16. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Oppose? Thank you, John Reiner. Thank you, John Burt. Thank you, Betsy
you.
McAllister.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mike Whitney, for joining our meeting, and Ali Stockley. Thank you. And Sima, thank you for coming. You were quiet. You didn't have